Welcome to Beyond a Thought and welcome to the third interview in the interview series. In this video, I'll be chatting to Harry Harding, who is an Australian expat and has been living in Guangdong, China for the past 10 years as a journalist and television reporter for a local station. He has won one of the highest journalism awards in China, as well as recorded a few hit songs in fluent Chinese that have been topping the charts. Online, he mainly goes by the name Hazza for his YouTube channel, HazzaChinaVlogs, where he talks all things China, Chinese culture, and the relationship it has with Australia, which is what interested me in chatting to him. I wanted to speak about the importance of accepting other cultures and the understanding that not everything we hear online and in the media is necessarily what it seems. Once again, this interview will be uploaded into shorter segments in case you wanted that easier to consume content. Now let's get started.
All right, mate, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
This for my audience, this is my first time, and for yours. So there's a button where you take up the screen.
Yes.
The main reason why I want to have this is to hear your side of what it's like living in China and being an outsider sort of thing, and especially with what's happening at the moment. And so I guess my first question is, what drew you to Chinese culture and made you want to create a life in, you're going to have to correct me, Guangzhou, and wanted to create a life in Guangzhou?
Well, firstly, I just want to say thank you for wanting to speak to me, because I've realized this year that, there are a few people back home that aren't really interested in hearing what I have to say. So I'm grateful that you're open, to having this conversation, and I really appreciate it. But back to your question. So we went to the same school. I was at Westmoreton from prep to grade 12. And so we had Chinese from grades 1 to 6. So that was like my first introduction to anything related to China. But then years down the track, I picked it up again and I went to Chinatown with my mum, as I told you in our last conversation that failed. And we went into this store that was selling Chinese CDs, music CDs, back in the day when people actually bought CDs. And there was this one album that had this really amazing cover art, and it was Jay Chou's Nocturnal. If anyone out there is interested, you can search up Jay Chou and Nocturnal. And I bought that CD and took it home, and I just kept listening to the songs on the album. And I was just, so just amazed by the mix of Western and Eastern music styles and traditional Chinese elements with modern music styles like rap and hip hop and stuff like that. So, but at the time I was just frustrated because I couldn't understand what Jay Chou was singing. And Mei Ling, I just couldn't understand what Mei Ling was singing. Not Mei Ling. I couldn't understand what Jay Chou was singing about. So that was really like the catalyst moment for me deciding to learn Chinese. I just had this weird goal in mind that I wanted to understand the lyrics. And, from after that, I obviously made friends with a lot of the international students at our school. They invited me to visit them in China. So I'd been to China a couple of times. And then I came to China for a holiday after graduating from university, and came to Guangzhou for a few days after another complicated series of unfortunate events that brought me here. And it was just, being in the right place at the right time. And I scored a job, and I've been here ever since. Having said that, though, when I first arrived here and got the job, my plan was to stay here for 1 year, or maybe 2 at the most, and just enjoy it, get some experience, and then go home. But slowly after time, the longer you stay in a place, the harder it is to leave, because you get used to everything. You make friends, you make connections, and then it's been 10 years now. So when I think about leaving and starting in another place, it is kind of scary, because it's like you have to start from scratch all over again. And I don't know, I just don't really want to do that. And I'm enjoying my life here. So
Yeah, no, that's such a big.
No.
I'd say it's such a big
Really?
cultural journey from just hearing one thing of inspiration, which was the music, and that's got you into Chinese music as well. I believe you can even sing. Yeah, it's incredible.
So yeah, I've released a couple of singles here in China, and I have one song at the moment. It's called "I Was Wrong," and it's actually on a national chart that's being played by 25 radio stations across China. And the last time I was updated, it was at number 5. So, I mean, I don't consider myself a professional singer, but I'm really just glad that this song has done so well, and it's gotten millions of hits online here in China. And I've got a lot of good feedback.
Can you tell me quickly what the song's actually about? Or
so the song is kind of related to a personal experience that I had relationship-wise. So it's sort of all about the fact that, you know, I was in a relationship that didn't work out, and you know, it's sort of, I mean, the main meaning of the song is that, you know, at the time I thought we were destined to be together forever, and that everything would work out. But in the end, it was basically just, you know, one phrase, one sentence, or just one, you know, mean-spirited thing said in the moment that caused the relationship to decline and eventually end. So yeah, so it's based on a real life experience, and it was also just a way of letting go to sing that song and release it. And I actually, you know, hadn't planned any promotional activities or anything for it, so I just put it out there. Didn't expect it, you know, to do as well as it's done, but yeah, it's on iTunes and Spotify and all of those platforms as well for anyone who's interested in taking a listen.
Yeah, wow. Well, yeah, as upsetting as that is, you know, like look at Adele and look at Taylor Swift. So that style does really well, and you know, well done. it's a good reason why it's doing well on the charts, you know.
Yeah.
And with that, I guess what's the biggest culture shock or change you found from Australia?
So, I mean, when I first arrived here, I was just, you know, like China just hits you as soon as you leave the airport because it's so, you know, full of life and noise and action here. So as soon as you leave the airport, there are people everywhere. There are cars everywhere. You know, there are some people shouting or laughing or, you know, it's just full on, and it's an information overload. Whereas when you walk out from the airport in Brisbane, you know, it's quiet, hardly anybody's around. There might be 1 or 2 taxis. So it doesn't take that long to, you know, accustomize yourself to Brisbane because it doesn't hit you straight away. But here in China, when you leave an airport, it's just in your face straight away. And so when I went from the airport to where I was staying when I first arrived in Guangzhou, you know, what really just hit me straight away was the traffic here. It's so different to Brisbane. It's so different to back home. I would describe it as organized chaos because it really is, for people that are not used to the roads here, it can be a little bit, you know, a little bit of a shock to come here and just see like there are so many cars and you know, back in the day, some people didn't tend to indicate when they were changing lanes, or they might, you know, run through red lights or things like that. So you had to be really careful crossing the street. But, you know, I've been here for 10 years and I haven't been in a single car accident. And over those 10 years, like I've seen huge improvements in that regard because, you know, one example is in the past, it was only required that people in the driver's seat and the passenger seat, front passenger seat of cars had to wear seatbelts. But now the rules, the law has been changed. So everybody is now required to wear a seatbelt. And over the last couple of weeks, every time I've gotten into a taxi or an Uber, which is called Didi in China, the driver has just reminded me as soon as I got in the car to please wear my seatbelt. So, yeah, I guess that was one thing that really was a big difference when I first arrived. I mean, the list is endless. I mean, cultural differences, we could talk all day about those. You know, it's just an entirely different world.
Yeah, I might speak further on that later, but I guess the other question is, you said briefly about people not knowing what celiac is and then understanding it. Do you find that China or Chinese people and Chinese culture has been quite welcoming and accepting of you, you know, especially knowing that you're probably not from there, you know, you stand out like a sore thumb, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely stand out like a sore thumb. You know, blonde hair, blue eyes, you know, wherever I go, people tend to notice me. And it's also made worse by the fact that I'm on TV. So
you got to that, and I was about to say, other than the fact that you're on TV and people know you from TV, do you get people who don't know you from TV but wanting photos with you just because you're blonde and blue eyes and white?
Actually, no. No, I don't. I mean, maybe years ago, there were people that, especially in more rural areas, that, you know, perhaps they'd never met a foreigner in their life, so they did want to take a photo with you. But here in Guangzhou, like, no one ever just comes up to you for a photo because you're a foreigner. I mean, most people that ask me for photos will say like, "Oh, are you Hazza? Oh, I saw you on the TV," or I listened to your song, and do you mind if we take a photo? And they're really polite about it. I actually have a funny story about that because this was years and years ago. It was an extremely hot day here in Guangzhou. I just finished work. I was sweating. I was just, you know, a little bit frustrated because, you know, there were a few things that I was trying to figure out at home regarding the internet and electricity, and my Chinese still wasn't that great. So I was having a bit of a bad day, and I was in H&M lining up. And there was this girl behind me, and she just kind of slowly kept getting closer and closer to me. And it was hot, and I was sweating, and I was like, "Can you please just give me space?" And then she sort of like maneuvered herself around to my side, and I felt like she was trying to cut in line. So I was about to turn around and give her a serve. And as soon as I turned around, she said, "Excuse me, are you Hazza?" And I just felt so bad because I was just about to give her a serve, and then she was so nice, and I think she was just shy about speaking to me. So she was, the whole time she was sort of just thinking like, "Oh, should I say something?" Or, "Oh," you know, because I feel like a lot of the time Chinese people sometimes here in Guangzhou, they look at me and then they do a double take and they're like, "Hang on. Oh." And then some people will come up to me and say hi. Some people, some people take photos like this.
Yeah.
And then send them to me on social media and say, "I saw you on the street the other day." And
a photo of you walking.
You should have come up to me and said hello. I would have been happy to have a conversation with you. But it's kind of, you know, a little bit scary when people send you photos like that.
A photo of you like eating awkwardly or something, or
yeah.
walking your dog, or like picking up a dog poo. You know, it's like
yeah.
So
I wear my pajamas downstairs when I'm walking in the morning, and the craziest pajamas you've ever seen. It's a onesie, and it's Stitch from Lilo and Stitch.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And you know, it just one day I just got out of bed and I was like, I do not want to get changed, because it was when the weather was getting a little bit cooler, and I was like, oh no, I'm not going to get changed. I'll just walk Mei-Ling. And then so when we get downstairs and walk out of the elevator, there's a mirror, you know, opposite the elevator, and I realized like, oh, I'm still in my Stitch costume, my Stitch pajamas. And I was like, oh, are people going to like look at me weirdly? Are people going to say anything to me? And I was just walking mailing, and surprisingly, like, no one even batted an eyelid, like it was just this weird, I don't know,
maybe that's
people
normal.
didn't even-
Maybe, yeah. Maybe like people just go in their pajamas, on the odd occasion. You know what I mean? But like,
people tend
I
to
don't.
just sort of leave you alone. It's kind of liberating, actually.
There you go. Yeah, I was about to say, like, I don't know what it's like to be famous. Not yet, so I can't say that. I'd have a fear of like the paparazzi, but taking a photo of you in your Stitch onesie, a little,
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't care because, I mean, obviously when people, post pictures on social media and then they at you and say, oh, I saw you in the street the other day. And, it mightn't have been the best angle, or I wasn't sucking my belly in at the time. So sometimes I just wish, you could have came up to me and we could have had a selfie, and I would have edited it, on my phone and made it both look good.
this one, this one, that's great.
Yeah.
It's really funny. I mean, like, just from my perspective, when I was in China for 3 weeks, Shenyang, I hope I'm saying that right. Near North Korea.
Shenyang.
Shenyang. Yeah. I got asked for photos. It was like 2 days in or something, and it was really weird. Like, I got a massive ego trip towards the end of it because, like, I was talking like to my colleagues at the time, and like this like elderly lady came up to me, and she's like, I'm talking, and I stopped for a photo. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. And then she walked off, and I kept talking. It's like, whoa! I just realized, I'm like, whoa! I just like became so comfortable with taking a photo with a stranger because it was like maybe the 5th or 6th time it happened. So it was really weird.
I think that that does happen in some areas of China, but Guangzhou, which is the city that I'm living in, I mean, it was the first city to open to international trade in China. And it's basically been like, I guess, sort of the window to the world for China for like decades and decades. So, people don't even really, give you a second glance just because you're a foreigner here in Guangzhou. But, in other places, there are people that will get excited because, they're seeing a foreigner for the first time in maybe not their life, but maybe years.
Yeah. Have you had any different reactions? We're talking about the relationships between China and Australia, especially as of recently. Have you had any different reactions once they find out you're from Australia, or if you say, I'm Australian or originally from Australia?
Generally speaking, Chinese people here, they're really actually welcoming. They won't stigmatize you or discriminate you based on your nationality. Just recently, I've heard Kevin Rudd's name a lot. So when I get in a taxi and I have a conversation with the driver and he asks me where I'm from and I say Australia, and he'll say like, oh, Kevin Rudd, he can speak amazing Chinese, things like that. Or I might get asked about the wine tariffs, what I think about the wine tariffs. But recently, I haven't really copped any flack for being Australian, just from random people in public. But obviously close friends and colleagues, they've had conversations with me about what's going on between our two countries. And I've tried to explain it the best way possible. And, after the conversation ends, we just go on with life. So I think people here in China, they, I guess they acknowledge your nationality, but then they still treat you as an individual, which I like. I think that's actually a pretty good way to go about life.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's what's most important, which is, and I guess it brings me to the next part, which you've been hearing a lot from Australia or Australians. And what's the most common assumptions you hear from Australia about, Chinese culture, or from, from abroad about China?
Oh, wow. There's also a long list I could go through there as well.
Anything that you just like, it just red flags, it's just wrong, and it just needs more information or more, you know?
Well, one example would be the food shortage idea. So a couple of months ago, I was asked by a couple of people whether or not there was enough food here in China because they had read news stories about a food shortage in China. And, that was news to me because, I mean, I've gained a few too many kilos this year due to the pandemic. And, I haven't been back at the gym because even though gyms are open, the pandemic hasn't, it hasn't finished yet. And I think that gyms are like a high risk area. So I'm staying away from the gym. And basically that was just a long excuse for being lazy and not going to the gym. But yeah, I mean, when people were asking me about the food shortage, and it was just, wow, it was amazing. I went and I read some of those articles, and then last week I actually did a story for our news program about how the CPI in Guangdong had dropped and how food prices across a number of categories had dropped like significantly, like some by 9%. And, I'm not an economist, so maybe this assumption is wrong, but to me, I mean, the fact that food prices have dropped shows that there is not a food shortage, because if there was a shortage of food, prices would go up. There was pork prices did go up for a while because there was a production shortage with pork, but they found ways to increase production, and now the pork price has dropped significantly. So that's just one thing. I guess, there are so many little things that just don't align with what I've seen or experienced. And I think another thing is a lot of people back home think that, my job is just to be a mouthpiece for the Chinese government. And basically my job is just, to be given a script and read it in front of a camera. And that is one aspect of my job as a news anchor, because I think that that would be the same for every single news anchor around the world. We have producers, we have reporters, and we have editors. So yes, when I present the news, I am reading a script, but that's not my only job. I'm also a reporter. I also write my own stories. I also produce my own content. And nobody has ever come to me and just given me a list and said, these are the things that you cannot talk about or you cannot say. And I think that that's a misconception because, it just frustrates me a little bit because people just think that I must be just a useful idiot, I think is one term I heard from somebody. But the fact of the matter is they're making these assumptions without having been in my job, without having, experienced what I do on a daily basis. And that just frustrates me because assumptions are dangerous. And I've seen that this year, I mentioned in another video recently that I did that it would be unprofessional for me to go into, very fine detail about how my role or what my role is and how my job works, because I'm currently employed by GRT, which is the company I work for. But I can say that, the assumption that I'm just, somebody that rocks up to work, gets handed a script and reads it to a camera is totally false and wrong. I feel like, yes, I do work for state-owned media in China, but I, try my best to maintain journalistic integrity. I do fact-checking. I don't report things or speak about things that I personally do not have any firsthand, references for or contacts or sources. So when people make these assumptions and they ask me like, why aren't you talking about this? Or why aren't you talking about that? It's frustrating because it's like, well, because I'm talking about this right now. I can't talk about everything at once. Maybe I will talk about that in the future, in a future story. But, yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting. This is, if I can make a plug for Avatar: The Last Airbender in every video I do, I will. But like, it reminds me of season 2 when they're in. Oh God, this is embarrassing. But the capital, the Earth Kingdom capital, and the people get brainwashed, and they're like, there's no war outside Ba Sing Se. So Ba Sing Se, and it's based on China, and it's just sort of like. Yeah, it's all based on China, and sort of like gives this. When you hear that, you're like, oh wow, so Chinese people don't know what's happening outside China, or there's no war outside China, and that's just but it's just like it's just these things you see that aren't actually real. Like that's fantasy. That's a fantasy show, But then it brings me into a different. That was just a plug. Now it brings me into my next point, which is it's double standards because you look at our news programs like owned by Rupert Murdoch, the Murdoch media, and how the Murdoch media will say that climate change is fake, or say climate change isn't real, or et cetera, or Fox News sort of saying that Donald Trump is telling the truth, or he doesn't lie, or blah blah blah. So it's just like to say that China doesn't tell the truth, but then not look at your own landscape, or not look at your own front step.
Exactly. And I think the difference is here in China, it's really just, it's clear, the source. That if you watch television in China, it's going to be produced by state-owned media. So basically, there's no guesswork. You're not, like when you,
ABC.
For example, ABC, ABC is funded by the Australian government, but it's not controlled, or at least that's what its purpose is. It's funded by the government, but it's not controlled by the government. But here in China, when you do watch domestic television here in China, that it is state-owned media. So there's no one's being fooled. Everybody knows that when it comes to television, it's funded at least partly by the government. Whereas overseas, you turn on a news channel and it looks like a news channel. It has the same graphics. It has the little ticker down the bottom, but how you don't know who's actually behind the channel. You don't know who owns the channel, and then you don't know how much influence they have over the content that they're putting out there based on their own personal interests. So personally, people might criticize me for saying this, but here in China, the media here is highly regulated, but that means that they don't make a lot of mistakes when it comes to reporting news and facts. And actually, television and radio sometimes are much slower than online sources, because a big part of our job is making sure that we don't make mistakes and that we don't report misleading information.
Is that because you're state funded and you could get in trouble, or?
Yes. Well, we wouldn't get in trouble. Obviously, if we do make a mistake and report something that's inaccurate, obviously, we will, get told about it and told to try to avoid that in the future. But it's because, nobody wants to be responsible for reporting an inaccurate statement or for, making false claims. So that's why sometimes news in China can be a little bit slow, because here in China, it doesn't work. If you have a source who says something, you can't just say so-and-so said this. because that, that's a little bit dangerous, because once you report on what someone has said, it has already become news and it's re-quotable by other people. So if you get a source that says one thing, then you have to do research to find out whether or not the statement that person made is accurate or inaccurate. And it's been like that, during the pandemic as well, because one of the major differences between Chinese media and foreign media that I've noticed is that from day one, when I first started reporting on COVID-19 from China, in every single story that I read or produced or wrote, the message was always the same: wear a mask, disinfect everything, wash your hands, maintain social distancing. And there was no discussion or debate about whether or not that works. It was just, that's the message that the experts are sending out. So that's our role as the media, is to share that message with our audience, because medical experts are saying that. And the only debate that happened was about which masks would be the most effective. So there are all different kinds of masks, medical masks. There are dust masks. There are masks, produced specifically for construction sites. And so the debate was about how effective each type of mask would be against the COVID-19 pathogen. Whereas, I would watch some programs from the United States, for example, and people were on there debating about the efficacy of masks and whether social distancing works, or, it just, to me, it was just almost shocking, because I felt like, this is irresponsible. I know perhaps this is what the audience enjoys watching, but even sowing the seed of doubt that masks don't work will result in death. It will. It's just, there's no question about it, because if medical experts are saying masks work, and then you question that on air and invite somebody along that disagrees with that, then there will be people out there watching the program that think, oh, yeah, I agree with that too. I don't think masks work, therefore I'm not going to wear one. They could get infected and then spread the disease to their family or friends, and that could result in someone dying. That. So when people talk to me about the way that the Chinese media works, I tell them I can see the benefit. I can also see the benefit in Western media as well. There's
pros and cons on both sides.
Yes,
like
yes,
anything.
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
And which is very interesting, because it's like, little plug, but my next video is going to be about opinions, and when you are entitled to your opinion, and when you're not entitled to your opinion. And it's like this thing about news and media, or the mask debate, or not quotes, but the mask debate, as they were saying in America. It's like you said, get on the experts. Like,
exactly.
Don't, like, if you're a reporter saying one thing, it's like anything, say, the World Health Organization said the masks are the best tactic, we're going to bring on this person to confirm that from this XYZ scientist. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And like, because like what I see commonly in Australian media and American media is like, we have 3 people, one from Brisbane, one from Melbourne, one from Sydney, talking about whether masks work. Who are these 3 people? Oh, they're all just reporters. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, that I don't know. Like you can tell me what a reporter is, what a reporter does, but it's like, I believe, my perspective is like to tell the news and have an expert back that up, or bring in their thoughts. Yeah. It's like,
exactly.
It's so toxic, and it's just like, especially seeing what it does. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, yes, sometimes it is healthy to question, the authorities or experts. But if the majority of experts are saying that masks work, I think it's responsible journalism to put that message out there. because people are listening to what you have to say. And, going back to what we mentioned earlier with the food shortage myth in China, since then, I haven't seen any reports from those people saying we got it wrong. It just, at the time they're reporting, it obviously attracted an audience of people that were unhappy with China and that enjoyed reading a story that was negative on China, but they were wrong. There was no massive food shortage in China, and no one has come out to correct their mistake. So I mean, the lines between entertainment and news have been blurred in the West, and also sometimes it's just not made explicitly clear enough that a report is an opinion. So that's why when it's on a news channel and you can see the ticker on the bottom of the screen, and it looks like news, but someone is just giving their opinion, I feel like that is dangerous. Like there should be this disclaimer that says this is opinion,
which is those, in Australia it's the Sunrise or morning show, and that's where a lot of those opinions happen. And it's like it's healthy to have opinions, but it can also get skewed where
exactly,
you're telecasting these opinions and then people are going to take it as truth, So and I guess that brings me to my other question, which is, where do you believe these assumptions, ideas and perspectives come from? Is it mainly media in your perspective or your idea?
I mean, this is really a complicated issue. I think it's multifaceted. So on the one hand, we have the West and the media, which is a money-making machine. It's a business. It places profit over everything else. And then, so the news needs content. And there are not enough people in the world that understand China enough to label themselves as experts, but a lot of people do. A lot of people do that. They call themselves China experts, and a lot of those people, they haven't even lived in China before. They are they study China based on other reports written by people overseas, and it's just this vicious cycle of misinformation that gets regurgitated by other people, and then if they're labeled as a China expert, then what they're saying about China is therefore, categorized as being reliable and accurate. At the same time, I think China was fairly slow to start creating content for an international audience. I mean, think about China. So it's a country of 1.4 billion people. And at the moment, it has one main English channel that broadcasts globally. Our international channel also broadcasts to a number of countries around the world. But for a country with 1.4 billion people, the English content coming out of China doesn't actually represent the size of the country and its influence on the global stage. Think about the United States of America, how many news networks they have, how many channels out of America broadcast all over the world, and how many people actually watch those. So I think China has been a little bit, a little bit slow to keep up in that regard. But at the same time, I feel like China has the attitude where it doesn't feel like it needs to explain itself to the world, because 1/6 of the world's population lives here in this country. So, but at the same time, it is a little bit difficult for people to, decipher fact from fiction when it comes to China, just because there is so much information out there. There is so much disinformation. There are news outlets that produce content that are solely aimed at discrediting China, and if you do look into that, you'll find that there are a lot of those kinds of outlets out there. And then there are journalists that don't know much about China, and then they read an article released by one of those media outlets and just take that as a source and then rewrite the story to suit their audience. And so that's how easily misinformation can get spread. So, you know, I would never be out there and say that, you know, Chinese media is the most transparent in the world. But I would say that Chinese media offers a perspective of China that you don't get anywhere else. And, you know, Chinese media is responsible in terms of fact checking, because here in China, it is extremely important to make sure that what you are saying is accurate.
That's the kicker. And like, I think I heard Denzel Washington, funnily enough, say that media is often, it's not about being right, it's often about being first. And that's the problem, is that a lot of media outlets, they just want to be first. It's like they just want to be first.
Yeah.
To say
this, you know. And I have to say that for a Western audience, news in China is extremely boring. Like, it's extremely boring, because basically what news in China is basically, on this date, X and Y did this, X and Y said this, AB expert expressed this. You know, it's just, there's no such thing as sensationalized. Yeah, I know.
It shouldn't be entertainment. It should be.
Yes.
If it's boring, it's boring. It's why I preferred SBS News or ABC News. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it wasn't, you know, neighbors at war. You know, like, where's better to shop this Christmas, Coles or Woolworths? You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Real world issues, and you know.
Yeah.
So I'm not like, I'm agreeing with you. It's just like, you know, news isn't meant to be entertainment, you know. So it's just it blows my mind. And I guess so since surrounding yourself with Chinese culture and knowing the people, do you think there's truth to the idea of, you know, first knowing or experiencing something before believing what you hear from others?
Oh, massively, definitely. After living here in China for 10 years, I think my perspective on, you know, what I believe or how I come to believe something has changed. So in the past, I would rely on the news or on the media or the internet to find out information about different parts of the world. But I think after living in China, now I believe that if I haven't personally seen it, heard it, or experienced it, I can't guarantee that it is true, because I've just seen so much disinformation out there about China, and it just shocks me. And, you know, that's why when people specifically ask me about certain topics and say, why don't you speak about this, or why don't you speak about that? And I always reply to them and say, it's because I'm not there. So I can't give you any first-hand knowledge. All I could do is regurgitate second-hand sources. And you know, the only difference between you and me is the fact that I have a platform and you don't. But I would prefer to make sure that when I do use my platform, I'm giving out accurate information. So I just really, you know, there are so many things that I just want to see and experience in the world now, because, you know, seeing is believing. I've come to realize that, because before I came to China, I had a lot of preconceived ideas about this country as well. And, you know, for the first 2 or 3 years that I was living here, I still believed in a lot of those, you know, preconceived ideas, even though I was here, just because they had been so just imprinted on my mind and my thought process, that there was just always that suspicion, or, you know, I don't know. It's hard to explain. It's just, I think now I can honestly just say that seeing is believing. So I do like to, you know, read a lot of sources, a lot of different sources. I do like to watch a lot of different media outlets to gauge what they are saying, but I will never use somebody else's secondhand information as my own information. That's just my sort of the way I go about things now. And some people say, oh, well, that's a convenient excuse, or that's convenient for you, so you don't have to talk about sensitive topics. Well,
yes, it
okay,
is.
maybe
Yes, it is convenient. Yes.
Maybe one day when I'm, living in a different part of China, I will be able to talk about certain issues. But the fact of the matter is, I'm a local reporter here in Guangdong and in Guangzhou, and so everything I report on happens here in this province.
And I mean,
sorry.
To go on to that, it's like, I was telling you, or like saying to you that I would like to get someone of Chinese background living in Australia to talk about what it's like being, of Chinese heritage in Australia, and of China, and do you think that's important too? Like, hearing it from the horse's mouth, like, Black Lives Matter was huge this year, and then having, white reporters talking about what it's like being black, it just doesn't work. Like, you know what I mean? So it's, like we're talking about experts before, getting on a scientist, etc. So it's like, do you think that's importance too? Like getting people who are experiencing it to talk about the experiences, or,
I mean, obviously, I think it's important to hear from a wide range of people, to get perspectives from all different kinds of people. When you talk about interviewing a Chinese person in Australia, I mean, you also have to think about, like, whose perspective do you want to hear? Because there are Chinese students, like Chinese nationals in Australia, and then there are also Chinese citizens who were born in China but now call Australia home. And there are also second and third and fourth generation Australians of Chinese descent in Australia. So I guess in terms of the Australia-China issue at the moment, you'll definitely hear different perspectives from all of those demographics, because they are all, coming at this from a different perspective themselves. So, I mean, it's hard, to, I would just say it would be great to just interview, a person of Chinese descent in Australia, regardless of whether they are first generation, second generation, third generation, just to find out how growing up in Australia as a Chinese person or a person of Chinese descent was. I think it would also be interesting just to talk to an Australian person that has nothing to do with China, or who has never been to China, or who knows hardly anything about China, to hear what they have to say as well. Because I think that would be fascinating too, because obviously then it would be interesting to hear what they think, because everything that they think about China is based on what they've heard from other people.
I mean, that's, which is very interesting, because it sort of goes in that territory. It's like, I believe we should be asking questions, So it's like, when you hear something like that, it's like, why do you think that? Where did you hear that? What makes you believe that? Rather than often we hear someone say something, or we hear it from somewhere, and we don't keep asking questions about it. We're just like, okay, that's what you believe. That's what you believe. It's like, why do they believe that? That's I
think that is critical. People need to ask themselves why they believe in certain things and analyze that, because sometimes we just absorb things without even noticing. It's like an unconscious, process of just absorbing information from different sources. It could just be, as we're doing the dishes in the kitchen, and we hear someone on the television, on the news, saying something, and it just gets imprinted on our mind, and then from that day forth we just believe that without even knowing why. And scientific studies have actually been done on how that process works, and it's a really fascinating thing to explore.
I'll have to explore it. Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, it really is interesting. That's why I do really like to think carefully about what I say before I say it, because you know, it's if you do have a voice, you should use it responsibly, I believe.
Yeah, 100%. You know, look at the president of the United States of America. You know, it's like, you know,
yeah.
And
honestly, I feel like I'm just going to come out and say it. I think that his conduct over the last 4 years has resulted in a world that now kind of accepts hate, even racism. You know, personal attacks have become something that is acceptable, because the president of the United States has been doing that for 4 years on Twitter. And he was the leader of the free world and the most powerful person on this planet. And if you follow his Twitter, you know, it's just so sad to see someone in such a major leadership position acting so immaturely and without even the slightest consideration of how what he is saying could affect other people and could result in people losing their lives. And there is nothing more precious or valuable than human life on this earth for us. I mean, you know, over the economy, over finance, over money, you know, at the end of the day, the most important thing, in my opinion, is human life. And I really hope that from January onwards, when there is a new president in the United States, I hope that his conduct will be different, because I feel like over the last 4 years, all of those people that have been hiding out in the woodworks, that had all of these hateful, you know, beliefs and stereotypes of other people, they felt validated by President Donald Trump expressing similar thoughts on Twitter to such a large audience. And when the leader of your country or the leader of a country that you know, highly relate to is doing that, it's almost like saying, this is okay now. You know, we can come out and just publicly hate an entire race of people. We can come out and publicly conduct character assassination on individuals just because we don't agree with their opinions. That is so sad, and I've just seen that. It's just been exacerbated over the last 4 years, especially on social media.
Yeah, wow. Especially to like sort of link it to the, you know, the freedom of speech, freedom of speech, you know, mantra, you know, and yeah, I mean, like, you know, we got Pauline Hanson here in Australia, like you.
Yeah. Oh, Mei Ling doesn't like Pauline.
that'll have to be your next like Instagram post. Mei Ling doesn't like Pauline.
Yeah.
But yeah, like she had a billboard in Melbourne the last elections we had here, saying, not afraid to say what we're all thinking.
What?
Yeah.
No. It's just what she's thinking, and she's surrounding herself with people that agree with her, and she's in her own little echo chamber. So people are thanking her for saying what they think. But the fact is, that's only a very small section of Australian society. And I'm sure that most Australians would agree with that Pauline Hanson does not represent the majority of Australians. There are some things that she says that I agree with as well sometimes. I mean, I'm going to be honest about it. I think there are a few things that she says that I listen to and I say, you know what, that does make sense to me. But overall, I think that she has been a terrible ambassador for our country, especially overseas, because especially in Asian countries, you know, during, I don't know whether it was the 90s or the early 2000s, where she was, you know, openly being racist and talking about Australia being swamped by Asians. You know, that was reported on in Asia. and it made Australia look terrible. It made us look like a country of racists. And the general feeling among non-Australians is that Australia is a very racist country. And I'm not just talking about Asian people or Chinese people. I've heard that from Americans. I've heard that from Canadians, you know, and I grew up in a country where, you know, I believed we were multicultural. I guess I grew up in an area that was, you know, not very diverse. So I never was exposed to discrimination or seeing other people being discriminated against. But, you know, over the last couple of years, I've communicated with a lot of people who have experienced racism in Australia. And I feel that we could have eliminated this problem by now, but we are still giving people like Pauline Hanson a platform. And that is just not, I mean, I agree with you, like freedom of speech is important, but I think there is a very fine line between freedom of speech and freedom of expression. So I feel that everyone has the right to say whatever they think. You know, you can say it to someone standing next to you. You can say it to a group of people. But if you stand up in front of a national audience and say something, you're not using your right to freedom of speech. You're using your right to freedom of expression. And I feel that is more of a privilege rather than a God-given right. Because those things that she said in the 90s, they still have ramifications today for Australians here in Asia.
Wow. Yeah. That's really, yeah. I really like what you said. Yeah. Oh God, I just had a point. Yes, this is a big point, which is Australia was born on racism. We had a genocide in this country of the land's indigenous people, you know, and so it's a big conversation. Like I'm just going to say it right now, 2 white men shouldn't be having this conversation, but I'm just going to bring it up. You know, I'm just going to put that out there that, like, you know, we need to accept that, you know, we were born on racism and we need to, you know, give the First Nations people, you know, a platform, and we need to once again, I think I should stop the conversation right here on this topic, but it's just knowing that, you know, and then I'm now going to move on, which is, you know, talking about how you said you can't just take one person's word and make that, you know, an idea of the whole culture. And we spoke about how in the media a few years ago they put a report out about a Chinese man who was flying, and he like threw hot water on a flight attendant. And then all the reports were, you know, Chinese people are bad travelers, you know. And it was, you know, I really liked what you said, because, you know, they took one man and one man's actions and spread that across the whole culture as, you know, anyone flying from China is a bad, you know, traveler, you know. And yeah,
it's sort of sad that they actually used his nationality or his ethnicity as something to report on that people needed to know. I mean, at the end of the day, he's an individual. You know, you could use his name, you could use his age. I don't know, you could talk about where he was traveling from and to, but I don't think you know, if it was a Caucasian person that had done the same thing, do you think they would write, you know, so-and-so, age 45, a Caucasian Australian did this? No, obviously not. They would not report on it in that manner.
Which is very common. It's very common in our news. So I was just going to say, it's, you know, we get in Melbourne, black gangs gone wild, you know, because, you know, someone from the South Sudanese community, you know, committed a crime, like, you know, broke into a car or something like that, or, you know, broke into 7-Eleven and now it's suddenly, black gangs gone wild, or the black community, and then they made up a gang, in Melbourne, and then the reports came out that there's more white. Obviously, there's more white crimes. It was like 93% white crimes, and 1.3% or something of South Sudanese crimes. But they never say white Australians gone wild. White gangs gone crazy. If it's
it wouldn't sell.
It wouldn't sell. Yeah.
It wouldn't sell. I think that there is a little bit of fear and anxiety amongst white Australian people because we went through a period where we had a white Australia policy. So that the ramifications from that are also still evident today because we went through a period in our country where all or most opportunities were only available to white people. So regardless of how skilled or how effective you were at your job, if you were a white person and you were able to do it, then you would get that job. And so I think that actually cultivated a generation of white people in Australia that took things for granted. And so now I feel like highly educated, skilled, capable white people in Australia, they don't have this fear. They're not worried about, immigration. They're not worried about people of other races coming to Australia and competing for jobs because they know within themselves that they are qualified for these jobs. So, that's why personally I'm not afraid of China because I can speak Chinese and I understand a bit about this country. So I'm not fearful of China. But for people who perhaps, grew up in Australia, during a time when the white Australia policy had just finished, had just been repealed, I can understand why maybe they might be a little bit worried because in the past there wasn't really any of that competition. There wasn't any pressure for them to really, excel because, now there are people that are coming from Asia to Australia that have spent, 16 years studying and they're highly skilled and people that come to Australia, they are going to be highly skilled because that's how our immigration system works. We want successful people from overseas to come to Australia. We want wealthy people from overseas to come to Australia. That is why perhaps some people will feel threatened, but that ultimately benefits our country because we are attracting people with skills. We are attracting people with financial means to invest and make business and create jobs. Mm-hmm. So that's why when these sensationalized headlines that reference a race or a group of people sell, because there is a group of people out there in Australia that will see that and just relate to it and be like, oh, I've got to know about that.
Yeah, I just had a comment from someone saying white racism is a white people problem. Talk about it, and she's right. It's like when a nation's been built off racism, when a nation's been built off white people and racism, it's become a white people problem. And talking about media diversity in this country, when you've just got white reporters or white people talking on TV, immigrants or people who, aren't white aren't seeing them being represented on television and aren't seeing, other perspectives and other ideas, Mm-hmm. And so that's very important as well, So it's, there's just so many layers.
Yeah. You know why I kind of can understand a little bit. Personally, I'm white, and but here in China, I am a minority in a way because, there aren't that many foreigners in China. So I know what it's like to live somewhere for 10 years and look totally different to everybody else. And also China has been through a lot over the last 200 years, including colonization, invasions. And, for a while, China was, having a really tough time. But China has lived to tell the tale of being colonized, of being invaded. History is always told by the winners. But in this case, China was a loser, a loser in battles and in terms of being colonized. But now it's risen up and it's a winner. So it gets to tell its story as well. And so I've heard about, some of the atrocities that occurred in China against the Chinese people by foreign powers from Chinese people. And so over the last 10 years, it's actually made me go back and revisit our own history. Because a lot of the things that I heard from Chinese people, how they feel about, for example, certain parts of their country being colonized, and certain, for example, like the Nanjing massacre, where 30,000, I want to make sure I get that right, either 30,000 or I could be wrong with that number, but a massive number of Chinese people were killed during an invasion by Japanese forces. And when I hear about these things from Chinese people, it makes me think about our own history. I'm not saying that, I don't love our country. I'm just saying that I'm willing to acknowledge and look at our history from a different perspective, because I feel like a lot of denial still takes place. Maybe, not open denial, but I think a lot of people, considering everything that happened throughout our history, it's a hard thing to face for a lot of people, emotionally and psychologically. So I think for a lot of people, denial is, I guess, a form of self-protection in a way.
Yeah, no, totally. And I mean, that's the thing. It's like, just going to make a quick plug, but like Dark Emu, where am I? Dark Emu by Bruce Pascoe. Same deal. It's an Indigenous man talking about, the things that happened in the past in this country. And, I think that's the, like we were saying before, like that's so important to hear it from, the people that went through what they went through, So,
that's why I love your channel, honestly, because you speak to people and you ask them questions and you listen. I get frustrated when people ask questions that aren't really questions. They're basically a statement, and then it's an invitation for the guest or the person to respond to that statement. That's not what I would define as a question. So I like it when you ask questions and you allow your guests to respond, and then you don't question what they say or, doubt what they say. You just accept what they say, because what right do you have to, tell someone that they're wrong about something that they've lived through? And, so that's why I love your channel, and that's why I love your content. Because I think you ask the right questions and you allow people to express their mind, and I think that's valuable. I mean, especially for people that don't usually have a voice but should have one.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and it's that experience. And oh god, I was like, I'm going to plug this again, but like experience and training. It's so important to say, I've had this experience and this is how I've got to this point, or I've had 6 years of training in this area and this is how I can have this opinion. So, it's so important, rather than like having no experience or no training in a certain area and, spurting an opinion,
Exactly.
So, totally, and this brings me to a separate question, but it's like, you said something I really liked, which was different doesn't equal wrong. And that really resonated with me. And like, you know, especially when I was in China for a few weeks, I found the same thing, that like, you did a great video about the toilets in China.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was quite different for me. But like, so, you know, squatting in a public toilet and just having a curtain to cover yourself or whatnot. But it's not wrong. It's just a different way of, you know, living. And so I guess is there anything in China you've preferred compared to Australia or Western culture? Or is there anything that you can say works, you know, differently or works well? I don't know.
Well, honestly, I would say squat toilets, they're a very good example of this, because when I first came to China, I hated squat toilets. You know, the building that I work in, we only have squat toilets because I'm the only foreign employee in our whole company. So Chinese people, they are used to using squat toilets. They're a lot easier to keep clean. And also, if you learn how to use a squat toilet, you don't have to come into physical contact with the toilet, you know. And so when I come across a clean squat toilet, to me, I'm always going to choose the squat toilet over the Western sit-down toilet, simply because I don't have to have physical contact with the toilet. And I feel like that is way more hygienic. You know, that's something that has changed for me over the years, because now public toilets in China, they have improved, and almost every public toilet that you go into, they will have at least one Western toilet, because, you know, foreign people that come to China, they obviously, a lot of them don't know how to use a squat toilet, find it difficult, or just feel more comfortable using a Western toilet. But for me, if I had the choice, I would go for the squat toilet. Obviously, at home, I like having a Western toilet because I'm the only one that uses it, and I clean quite frequently. But you know, in public, I don't know who sat on this toilet 5 minutes ago, or yeah. So
well, one, like, you don't have to go up to public toilets and like wipe down the seat with toilet paper and waste toilet paper by wiping down toilet seats.
Exactly.
But like, you know, two, you said, you know, China's now putting sit-down toilets in many public toilets, but it's like, I don't think China needs to do that. Like, learn the customs of another culture and know that that's how they live. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I know, but I think China has always tried to be okay. So in China, like, being a good guest is very important. Like, this is just a general value for all Chinese people. So, you know, when I go to rural areas to cover stories in villages and I meet people that are living in, you know, disadvantaged conditions, they are some of the most generous people I've ever met, because even if they have a limited income, they will always try to give you something. And not just me, my Chinese colleagues as well. So it's not because I'm a foreigner. It's because, you know, we've come from Guangzhou to their village and they want us to leave with a good impression of their village. So they give us boxes of fruit or some of their local specialties or whatever. And I think that is just a result of Chinese people having this culture of being good hosts. So wherever you go in China, like even in remote areas that no foreigner has ever been to, they have signs in both English and Chinese. And I admit that sometimes the English has a lot to be desired, still, could be improved quite a lot. But the fact that they are making an effort, you know, I think that speaks volumes. And when they do renovate the toilets and they, you know, think about the fact that some foreign people might come to China and might not be comfortable using a squat toilet and installing a Western toilet, I think that speaks volumes as well. I think China is just, you know, it's proud of being who it is and what it is, but at the same time, it wants to be welcoming and it wants to be approachable. It wants to make visitors feel comfortable.
I think that you really hit the nail on the head with that one, because it's like, I'm kind of go back to it, but like Pauline Hanson, just putting out statements of saying like, we don't want squat toilets here. You come to this country, you learn the language being English. I don't know why I use quote marks, but her saying that, that's the language you learn, when really we should learn the indigenous language. But it's like, saying that, no, we don't change for the rest of the world. This is how we are. Either terrible things, like either you learn it or you leave, or, you like it or you go somewhere else. It's just...
That's going to hurt us in the long term. Honestly, that's going to hurt us in the long term, because Australia has some of the highest rates of people only speaking one language among developed countries. You think about Europe. Most Europeans are bilingual or trilingual. China has one of the largest second language English speaking populations in the world. How many Australians can speak Chinese? And in the future, that is going to be so important, because China is going to become the largest economy in the world, and probably within the next decade. So kids that are being born today, in the future, 30 years down the track, there's a high chance that their job is going to involve China. And if we don't kick into gear now and start encouraging people to learn Chinese, then our kids and our country, we are going to be at a massive disadvantage, because we won't be able to effectively or meaningfully engage with the world's biggest economy. We can do that right now because the world's biggest economy is the United States of America, and they speak English. But, they're not going to be number one forever. China is going to be the biggest economy sooner or later, and we should encourage Australian people to learn Chinese. It seems Mei-Ling's not happy about that either. So, come here. Sorry.
No, you're fine. That's. It's once again, like, when I was in China, I found out from the Chinese partners that we had that every single school learnt English, or English was a topic. So, and I've also found out over time that that's very common in non-English speaking countries to learn English. So,
and people say that Australian kids shouldn't learn Chinese because they're worried about them being brainwashed. But I would counteract that argument by saying, are you that, do you lack confidence in Australia and our education system? I mean, the hundreds of millions of Chinese people that have learned English, and they still are very patriotic, and they are still some of them nationalistic. Language is a tool that you can use to benefit your own country. And I'm so grateful that our school had Chinese as a compulsory subject for 6 years, because that was just the first sort of stepping stone towards me, learning Chinese seriously and then coming to China. And, I'm not a threat to China. I'm not here to change the country. I'm here to learn about the country. And hopefully one day that will be useful for Australia-China relations. So when people criticize me for being here and doing what I'm doing, I just feel like we as Australians severely lack foresight. We just look at the present. Maybe we look as far as 4 years ahead, but rarely ever beyond that.
Past or future in a lot of ways, or past as well. You know what I mean? But, just quickly, like, speaking about the high school we went to, they have a huge international program. And like my family, we looked after, I think, like 4 international students and 1 teacher from Japan.
Nice.
And and that completely, I don't know if, like, as a kid my perspective was set, but like, I did hear a lot of racism around the schoolyard, et cetera, et cetera. But like having, kids my age living at my house who weren't, who were Chinese really changed that for me. It's like, no, it's like, and that's really important too, like having that international program, so.
Because it humanizes them.
Yeah.
When you discriminate against an entire race of people or an entire country, basically what you're doing is dehumanizing them. So it's hard for you to have empathy for them. And that's really sad. So, I said the other day in another video that, when it comes to the tensions between Australia and China, like if there's anything we can do personally. And I just suggested inviting your Chinese neighbor out to lunch and learning about each other, or, just little things like that. Because at the end of the day, when everything you hear about China is negative and you don't even know a single Chinese person on a personal level, I mean, that's just sad, because literally that is dehumanizing an entire race of people. At the end of the day, Chinese people, we share more in common with Chinese people than we actually know. A lot of our values are very similar. After I've lived here for 10 years, I've realized that as humans, we all are more similar than we are different. I just don't understand why we have to accentuate all of the differences. And being different isn't wrong. Being different is just being different. This is going to be cliche, but there's this song that Ariel from The Little Mermaid sang, and it's called In Harmony, and it's just singing about, like, if there was only one note, the world would be so boring, and she's happy that there are so many notes in so many different keys. And I know it's cliche, but that song just was stuck in my head since childhood. And recently I went back and listened to it, and I just thought, that is just the perfect message, even though it's a children's song from a Disney movie. But I mean, it's so true. I just wish we could force a lot of people around the world to listen to that song on repeat.
You can't do that, Harry. You can't force anyone. I'm sorry. Like, I love Disney as much as you do, but you can't try forcing Frozen on someone. That would be.
No. Frozen has been forced on me. I've been the judge at so many singing competitions here in China for kids, and the amount of times that I heard the Frozen theme song, I've heard it enough for 10 lifetimes.
There you go. Point proven. Yeah. But but I mean, like, we're going off script right now, but like, I don't know if you need to talk about it, but like Mulan is my favorite Disney film of all time.
The animated version?
The animated version. And then I saw it's still American. I saw the American live action, and I don't know if you've seen it.
I haven't seen it. Honestly, I haven't seen it yet, because I've heard some, less than positive reviews about the movie. But I have to say that the animated version is also one of my favorite movies of all time. Yeah.
Like I said, we're going off script, but like, do you think it was too westernized or too, Hollywoodized?
The animated version?
The animated version, yeah.
I think there was quite a bit of stereotyping in the movie, but I think it was important at the same time, because Disney is such a ubiquitous, source of media for children, and to have a Disney princess who is Chinese, I mean, I think that's a great thing, for all of the, I don't know if I should say this, but for all of the mistakes that Disney has made over the years. I think that producing Mulan was a step in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, you know, when you talk about stereotyping or about tailoring content to a certain audience, I think sometimes you have to balance, you know, authenticity with how receptive the audience is going to be to, you know, watching and consuming that media. Because if it was 100% authentic, without anything tailored to a Western audience, then probably it just wouldn't have served the purpose of letting kids know that there are different cultures out there in the world, and there are people that have, you know, different values, and there are, I mean, you know, different languages and different civilizations. So at the end of the day, I think it served a purpose, and I still love that movie. I love the song "Make a Man Out of You." I love that song.
Yeah. Oh, I heard a very interesting side to that, but I'll tell you that later. But yeah, I guess my next question is, I've heard some stories about, you know, Westerners going, oh, this is, I'm going to complete, you know, conspiracy theories and whatnot, but like, you know, stories where Westerners going missing in China and theories about the government kidnapping people. You know, do you feel it's safe living in China? Like, as an outsider, where do you think these stories come from? Like, once again.
Yeah, I mean, I feel totally safe here. If I didn't feel safe, I wouldn't be here. You know, I think the fact of the matter is, here in China, if you don't break the law, then you're safe.
Which is the same anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same anywhere. And I think that, you know, just because the topic of China is so sensitive at the moment, if foreigners do get arrested here in this country, then it is politicized, you know, and the Chinese legal system is different to our legal system back home. But we just have to let the legal process play out, you know. So in terms of Australians or other foreigners that have been arrested in China, it would be irresponsible to personally comment on their cases, because I have no information about why they were arrested, whether they were innocent or not, whether they had committed crimes. And I'm going to leave that up to the Chinese legal system to sort out and decide. And some people could say, well, you know, the legal system here is different, and the rate of incarceration is much higher than in other countries. But at the same time, you know, when you move to a different country, you should learn about the legal system. You should know that by living in another country, you need to follow the laws and regulations of that country. And if you don't, you could get in trouble. And for example, drugs in China are very, very, very serious. So in China, you can receive the death penalty for trafficking drugs. You know, in Australia, you wouldn't, because we don't have the death penalty. And sometimes drug traffickers will get a jail sentence of 7 or 8 years. So it's very different. But here in China, they take drugs very seriously. And there is also a historical reason for that. And that is because of the Opium Wars, you know, the first and the second Opium Wars in China. And China saw how much damage drugs did on society back then. And since then, it has had a very strict stance on drugs. So even marijuana, it's a drug that if you have a high quantity of marijuana on you and you get caught, then you are very likely to go to jail for a very long time. And if it's, you know, a more serious drug, a more serious, a larger quantity, then, you know, there is a possibility that you could receive the death sentence. And that's just, look it up. I mean, you just can look that up on the internet. You can find out, you know, what laws and regulations apply in the People's Republic of China before moving here. And if you decide that, you know, that's something that you can accept, then fine. But don't complain about the system when you get in trouble for doing something wrong. And I mean, so you know, I'm not, you know, commenting on any specific case because I don't have any information about anyone's specific case. But, you know, my thoughts on the matter are just let the system, you know, run how it runs.
Well, I'm going to take this moment to, you know, talk about Bali. You know, so like Chappelle Corby was a huge story now in Australia, and you know, the 3 or 6 people that also got arrested for drug trafficking and getting the death.
It was Bali 9, wasn't it?
Bali 9. There you go. Thank you. And so it's like I know where I stand on the death penalty. I'm completely against it. You know, I don't think we should have a death penalty in any country, but you know, you should know what you're getting into when you're going to these countries, you know, and understand that they have a death penalty, you know. So, and I guess also, like, my opinion is that you shouldn't be going into these countries and telling them how to run their country. It's like, you know, that's something as well, you know.
Because, you know, imagine if a Chinese person was arrested in Australia for committing an offence in Australia, and it became a massive story here in China, and people were, you know, the public was giving their opinion about what should happen to that Chinese person, and China was, you know, interfering in our legal system. There would be a massive outcry in Australia. Australians would be very, very upset with that. But it seems when it's the other way around, we're happy to do that. We're happy to sensationalize court cases from overseas, and we all have an opinion on whether they should be given a guilty or innocent verdict, when really we don't know the ins and outs of the case, of the cases in question. And also, I know that there are some people that get arrested overseas and their families plead with the media not to make the case public, because a lot of the time, you know, if it's made public, then it becomes a diplomatic issue. But if it's kept quiet, then, you know, there are certain, I don't know, diplomatic procedures that can take place that can help people out. Or, you know, if it's turned into a big sensationalized issue, that might affect the outcomes of the cases, just because it's become such a politicized issue. I'm not speaking specifically about China here. I'm speaking about any country around the world. You know, I think, you know, there are so many cases of Australians being arrested overseas that we don't know about, just because the families have been smart about how they've tackled the issue. They haven't gone straight to the media. I mean, think about the families or the high profile cases that we know about and that we have followed. I mean, I can think of 2 main examples. Both of them were young women. Both of them were in drug related cases, and both of those cases became, you know, fodder for the media. And I believe, honestly, I believe that a lot of the time, you know, if you just let the legal system, you know, run its course, if you keep quiet, if you don't turn it into an international news headline, the outcome can be so much better for everyone involved.
Yeah. Or like, you know, once again, it's my opinion, but like go into the legal system and make changes, you know, rather than speaking outside of a country about what another country should be doing. Like go to that country and speak to the people and see what the people think, and, you know, what they think of the law and if it should be changed, you know. Because once again, I think it's just sort of like it's your perspective of what how you think another country should be run. as opposed to how that country think it should be run, you know? So, yeah, it's a whole, yeah. This, I mean, I'm just gonna say this, but like, the Yulin Dog Meat Festival. Did I say Yulin right? Yulin?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of the place name.
Okay, the place name. But yeah, like that was.
But
happening.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, that was happening when I was in China with my university, and it was just like, if you're, you know, it's an old one because it's like, I don't agree with it, you know, but if you're eating meat, then you shouldn't be telling another country how they should eat their meat, you know. If you're eating a cow, pig, chicken, whatever, then you shouldn't say like, oh, it's wrong that you're eating this animal when you're already eating other animals. You know what I mean? So it's like,
yeah, so that's why I said different isn't always wrong. But having said that, a lot of Chinese people don't agree with that festival either. And a lot of Chinese people do not consume dog meat. You know, I think it's a very small, very, very small percentage of Chinese people that would actually eat dog meat. And most Chinese people would be against that. I mean, that's just a fact. And, you know, there are cities in China that have made it illegal to eat dog or sell dog meat. So, you know, things are improving in China. Things are changing in China. I think people just have these, you know, stereotypes set in stone. And, you know, it's hard to actually imagine how much China is changing, because if you live somewhere where you don't see constant daily changes, it's hard to imagine that that's happening somewhere else in the world. But it's happening here. And because I'm a reporter and I host the news, I know about all of these changes that are happening on a daily basis. And some of them are just staggering and so fast. So, but at the same time, you know, there are certain things that Chinese people would, you know, look at Australia and think, how could you do that? That's inhumane. For example, you know, like elderly care facilities, old people's homes. Chinese people look at that and see how we tend to put our elderly people in homes and pay for other people to take care of them, and they see that as highly disrespectful and very sad, because most old Chinese people live with their families until the day they die and are taken care of by their families until the day they die. You know, some people who may be wealthier might employ a carer to take care of them, but they'll still live at the family home, you know, and until it becomes a situation where they have to be in hospital. And a lot of Chinese people have spoken to me about that and have asked me, like, do your grandparents live in an elderly care facility? Or and how would you feel if your parents were living in an old people's home or something like that? And it really made me think, and I've since had a conversation with my mum and dad about that. And that's just something that, you know, I wouldn't have brought up with my family had I not lived in China, because that's just not something that I would think about. So there are things, it goes both ways. Like, there are things that we think of as normal in Australia that other people look at and think are barbaric. I mean, that sounds like an extreme word to use, but for some people, just putting old people, like the people that they respect the most, because here in China, from a young age, you're always taught to respect your elders. So for a lot of Chinese people, thinking about putting their grandma or their grandpa in this facility where nobody really is giving them the care or attention that they need is just unimaginable.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you brought it up. Yeah, no, it's an idea that I often don't think about, because you don't hear the other perspective, the other, you know. Little plug, but great film. I don't know if you've seen it, but The Farewell, amazing. You know, it won, I think, an Oscar. I think The Farewell.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
I'll watch it tonight.
it's so good. And it goes on that this young Chinese woman who lives in New York with her Chinese parents who immigrated to New York, and she speaks, you know, Chinese and English. And anyway, she goes back to China because her grandmother's sick, and it shows, you know, how the whole family operates.
Yes, I have seen that.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Oh,
yeah.
Because when I saw it, I can remember the Chinese name for the movie. Never even paid attention to the English name of the movie. But yes, no, that is based off a true story. That movie. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah. On that note, I was going to say, yeah, there you go. So, like, when I was in China, you know, the Chinese students we were around, none of them ate, you know, dog meat. So once again, but like all the news and media I heard about the festival was like, you know, China eats, you know, not certain people. So once again, we go on that topic.
And can I just say one thing? Because I actually really enjoy kangaroo meat.
Yeah.
And, you know, Chinese people have asked me, do you eat kangaroo meat? And I say, well, yeah, like most of the trips back home, you know, I like kangaroo sausages and kangaroo steak, and they're just shocked. They're like, how can you eat? I mean, it's on your coat of arms. It's like kangaroos are your national treasure. How can you eat kangaroo meat? So, I mean,
but on that note, like our First Nations people, you know, were eating kangaroo meat for 40,000 years, and then Britain colonized this land and then put the kangaroo on our coat of arms, you know? Yeah. So it's then...
And that's why I say different is not always wrong. It's just different.
Yeah, 100%. On the final question, can you just let me turn my light on? Because I'm going into
no worries. But is it still light outside?
No, it's the sun is setting. So
oh, okay.
Yeah,
wow, God, okay. So that is daylight savings at work.
That's daylight savings. It's
because like, I mean, the sun is setting here, starting to set here as well, and it's 5:42.
Oh, it's incredible. Like the other night, it was so hot here that I was just like, I'm not going to cook dinner until it gets dark because I just don't want to be over, you know, a hot flame. And then it got dark. I'm like, oh, cool, I'm going to cook dinner now. It was 9:45. I'm like, wow. Why do I want to cook dinner at 9:45? So then I made dinner and I didn't eat it. I had to.
Oh, no. Yeah. My body clock would be so messed up if I went from Guangzhou to Melbourne right now.
Oh, that's...
Because I'd probably be up until 3 or 4 in the morning.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like any jet lag, yeah. Well, on to my final question, though. What would you say to someone who hasn't been to China? How would you explain the culture and why it must be experienced?
So, to anybody coming to China, I would just say, try to keep an open mind. You know, I would love it if everyone could just, as soon as they cross the border into China, could just let go of all of their preconceived ideas, stop asking questions such as, why do they do this like this? We do it like this in Australia. Or focusing on the negatives. You know, I just wish people could come to China and just take China for China. Not China compared to anywhere, just China for China, and be open to new experiences and be open to letting yourself go outside your comfort zone and being okay with that. You know, because China has so much to offer and is such an amazing country with such diversity and a lot of interesting people. And if you just open yourself up a little bit to embracing that, I mean, you'll have such a much better time. You know, you can compare China with your home country all day long. And if you do that, you'll just never really, you know, get into the rhythm of life here. And this brings me to quite an interesting topic, because here in China, trust is really important. So a lot of business deals and a lot of negotiation and everything relies a lot on trust. So 2 weeks ago, I interviewed a furniture manufacturer in Foshan, which is next to Guangzhou, and it's like the furniture production capital of southern China. And I went to this showroom for this company who manufactures high-end furniture for an Italian brand. And I won't mention the brand because, you know, they didn't pay me any money to do, you know, advertising for them. But I spoke to this guy and I asked him, like, how did you first start working with this Italian brand? And he said, oh, sorry, it's a British brand. Sorry, a British brand. And he said, oh, well, it was 17 years ago, and you know, the owner of the company came to China and looked around for a while for a manufacturer, and we decided to work together. And then from that day forth, we just based our cooperation on Excel sheets. And I said, hang on a minute. Are you telling me you have never signed a contract with this company? No, we never signed a contract for 17 years. You haven't signed a contract for 17 years. You've got this massive showroom. You've been producing furniture for them for 17 years and you don't have a contract. What happens if something goes wrong? Oh, we've had problems in the past, but we've just talked it out. And, you know, we solved it through communication. It's like, wow. And I said, so why? So was it the British company that refused to sign a contract with you? And they said, no, the owner of that company came to us and said, I know how important trust is when doing business in China. So I would like to suggest not signing a contract. And they've been working together for 17 years. And it's, I mean, when I heard that story, it really struck a chord with me, because when I think back on most of the work that I've done in China and when I have signed contracts with people, it really was more of a formality than anything else. And honestly, I feel like, obviously when it's, you know, big business and, you know, massive deals and everything, obviously companies have law departments and they spend a lot of time on the contracts and everything like that. But when it's just a personal deal between two people here in China, you might sign a contract, but you'd probably be surprised at how short the contract is. You know, the contract could fit on one page, and it could an A4 page, and the font size could be 24. You know, I mean, sometimes I sign a contract with people and it's a little slip of paper like this, you know, that says I will work from such and such date to such and such date, and the payment will be however much, and then a signature of two people, and that's it. So, you know, trust is really important here. So I think come here and don't be so skeptical, or don't be so suspicious of everything. You know, sometimes you can take things at face value here in China. You know, there's this whole perception that what you see is not what you get, or what people say isn't the truth, or everything's for show here in China. But, you know, okay, sometimes some things are for show, but not all the time. And sometimes if you just let yourself be open to new things and just live in the moment.
Well, it goes on a video that you put out recently. The quote about solutions.
Mm-hmm.
There's always more solutions than problems.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and like it's really interesting because like from when I've got a friend in business, and he's doing quite well for himself, and it's like he spurts like always read the T's and C's, or like make sure you have a lawyer with you at all, when you're signing contract or et cetera, and it's like you're sort of, I guess, in a way brought up to believe that you could get screwed over. You're brought up to believe that things will go wrong and there's no way around it, So it's a really humbling perspective to know that.
Yeah. Because if Chinese people are looking for long-term cooperation, their goal is for, things to go smoothly and for both parties to be happy. Because if they want to keep this, because Chinese people, I mean, they like to stick with what they know sometimes. So if you work with someone once, there's a high possibility that if they thought you did a good job, they will definitely work with you again because they trust you. They think you're reliable and, they feel that the money they spent on hiring you to do a certain event or a job or whatever it is was money well spent. And, sometimes I've discovered that the first time that I worked with a Chinese person or a company, I did sign a contract, but not for the second or third time because I just felt there was no need. I trusted them, they trusted me, and we just respected each other. And, I didn't go into it thinking that I was going to get screwed over, and, sometimes there are issues that come up, but as I said, there are definitely more solutions than there are problems. And sometimes you also have to understand that when you go into a negotiation with a Chinese person, if you have in your mind a set, like an outcome set in stone that you want, and you're not willing to, negotiate or, meet in the middle, then, that's when things will go wrong. That's, you have to really understand what your bottom line is. Because
sorry, go on.
Because Chinese people will already have thought about what their bottom line is. So if you go into something only thinking about what you want as opposed to what you could accept, then that is the wrong approach. Because here in China, like, people just go into negotiations knowing that you're not going to get 100% of what you want when you negotiate. That's what negotiation is. So you have to have an idea about, okay, if I work with this person, what's, what is the lowest form of the lowest amount of payment I'm willing to accept. We might agree 3 months in advance on a set number, and then 2 months later the situation might change, and it might go from a full day event to a half day event, and then they say, look, we only want to pay you this much now. And sometimes you just have, if you just stuck to your guns and said, no, you said it was going to be this 1 month ago, I already promised you that I'd be available on that date, and now you're saying it's only going to be a half day thing. But they might have turned it from a full day thing into a half day thing, but they're still paying me 70% of the original fee that they offered. So sometimes you really do have to think about it from a different perspective, because they already have. So instead of just saying, okay, you're working half a day now, we'll only pay you half, they've already thought about the fact that you'll be upset that the plan has changed. So they have compensated you by, instead of paying you half, they're paying you 70% of what they originally offered. So
yeah, and it's like being open to change, and being and once again, we're talking about how the media portrays a whole culture or stereotypes, It's like, once again, it's understanding that if one thing goes wrong with one person, it's not the whole culture. It's not, like
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
like for example, if you are doing a deal with someone in China and it goes wrong, that's that person who screwed you over. It's not the whole culture. Yeah.
Exactly. And the other problem is in Australia, we know we can pick up on the hints, on the subtle clues that would tell us that someone's dodgy. But when you are engaging in a completely different culture, you don't have that radar. You don't have that filter that tells you, okay, this person's a little bit dodgy. I probably should avoid them. Because there are dodgy people in all countries. That's just a given. But the fact of the matter is that if you are coming to China to do business and you have no knowledge of this country and you don't know the subtle hints that you should be picking up on, then really the fact that you get screwed over is that whose fault is that? Because there are so many reliable people to work with in China. If you get screwed over, perhaps it's because you didn't do your homework properly, and that person that screwed you over targeted you because they know that you're an easy target.
Yeah.
And that would happen everywhere in the world, because I've heard stories of Chinese people in Australia that have, been the victims of scams and things like that as well. So,
yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, once again, it's just a ground rule to do your homework. Yeah.
Yep. Learning process.
100%. I really enjoyed this chat, and thank you so much for sitting down and talking to me.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
We finally did it.
Yay! Mei-Ling didn't disrupt us too many times, so thank goodness. Thanks, Mei-Ling.
I've got a comment saying, show us the dog. So
here we go. Oops, my headphone just fell out. She's getting a little bit cranky because it's just coming up to dinner time for Mei-Ling.
Oh, well, yeah, so we'll let you go for Mei-Ling's behalf. Thanks.
Oh, Mei-Ling.
Thanks so much, Harry. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm just really appreciative of the fact that you were willing to listen to what I had to say and you were open to hearing my opinion. I appreciate that. And I think that says a lot about you, who you are as a person, because you don't go into anything with, I don't know if you went into this, with preconceived ideas or judgments on me, but at least you didn't show it. And I think that says a lot about who you are as a person, because that is very rare these days, honestly. I hope more people will watch your channel and appreciate your content, because I honestly believe, like, even if you produce content that I don't agree with in the future, I think that what you're doing is just an amazing thing. You're letting people speak, you're listening. So I wish the world had more people like you, honestly.
Thanks, mate. Really appreciate it. I guess all the videos I make, it's like, you got to make it for yourself as well, and like this talking to you is for me as much it is for people who watch this and like my audience, because it's like when I'm hearing things from the Australian media about China, like you did a video about the tweet that China put out, it's like I would want to know the Chinese perspective. I want to know the Chinese people's thoughts, or rather than just taking what I'm hearing from Australian media or white people. So it's like you got to hear both sides. You got to hear both sides of the story.
Yeah. And sometimes if you're in the middle and you can understand the perspective of two sides and you're trying to explain it to both sides, sometimes you get shot as the messenger. That's just sad,
Yeah, 100%. Anyway, I'll let you get to feeding Mei-Ling.
All right, thanks, mate. And I'll get back to this beer that I haven't finished yet.
As opposed to the 4 beers we had last time, or you had last time.
Yeah, I've been very well behaved for the last 2 hours. It's Sunday afternoon here. Come on, I think
Yeah.
I deserve some respect for that.
Cheers, Harry. I'll see you later.